Who we play as in Five Nights at Freddy's games has always been a subject for debate, especially in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and 4. However, one thing the sequel era is kind of defined by is how they don't really keep the player's identity a secret. The only game with a mysterious protagonist is Help Wanted 2, but it was figured out rather quickly that we were playing as Cassie's dad. Will this try to continue into Secret of the Mimic? Probably, but as of now, there has been some speculation on who we may be playing as, and I wanted to join in on the discussion. So let's figure out who we were playing as before the release of Secret of the Mimic. But before we can do that, we have to talk about who we are unlikely to play as, and that is Edwin. When the game was first revealed, like the first teaser came out, a lot of people speculated that we could be playing as Edwin. I mean, it's a game all about the origins of the Mimic, and Edwin was the creator of the Mimic. It was a natural and satisfying choice. There's also this part in Tales of the Pizzaplex where Edwin says it's happening again. This is in reference to the Mimic kind of being in control of the Pizzaplex as the storyteller, which seems to be similar to what's going on in Secret of the Mimic with him kind of taking control of the MCM building. So it definitely could... Is it MCM? The building is MCM, right? Whatever, the warehouse. So it could have definitely pointed towards Edwin being the player, since he didn't experience that before, as far as we know in Tales. Unfortunately, the odds of Edwin being the player went down tremendously when the first real trailer for the game came out, and one of the first things we heard was that Edwin was missing.
One of our contractors, Edwin Murray, has gone missing.
Now, it's possible that Edwin somehow infiltrated the crew for some reason, or the trailer is just being misleading, which is why I just said it's unlikely, not like totally not possible. But since the game is all about the secret of the Mimic, it would make more sense for the protagonist to not really know who the Mimic is so they can learn alongside the player. It just seems unlikely that Edwin is the player now, which sucks because Edwin is a great character and would have made for a good protagonist, but it is what it is. Before we get into who the protagonist could be, I just have to really quickly ask you guys to subscribe. I'm trying to hit 3K before the end of the year, and subscribing would help me out massively, but only if you enjoy the video, and if you want to unsubscribe at any time, you can. Let's start with the most popular and natural assumption, that is that we'll be playing as just some random person. There really isn't evidence for this, I guess. It's just an assumption, although I'm not entirely sure if it will be a random person, and here's why. In the security breach and ruin descriptions, you know, our protagonists are named, right? But in the Secret of the Mimic description, the protagonist is still not named. I mean, why would Seawolf not reveal the name of the protagonist if it was a new character? The only other games where they've done this is Help Wanted 1 and 2, which are both VR games. So, you know, it's kind of some leeway there. Also, like, the Help Wanted 2 protagonist was someone who was a bit more important, and their identity was kept a secret, and they were presented as if they were like a new employee. Sure, Secret of the Mimic will have a VR mode, but it's releasing a flat mode first. So I'm not sure if it will be a random person. Although if we are a random person, I just hope, you know, that they are somewhat important. I think it would be cool if the player is the person who killed David, since it would give the protagonist a deeper connection to the Mimic. I also hope they are responsible for Fazbear Entertainment getting the Mimic. But that's all just wants, and honestly, the protagonist doesn't need to be a random person for all this to happen. I mean, they don't have to be someone else either. So let's just talk about some actual characters who could be the player. It's possible that Cassie's grandfather could be the player. Again, there isn't really evidence for this, and it is basically the same thing as it being a random person, but I wanted to throw it in here anyway because I think it could be cool. It also makes sense with how Cassie's family is very important in this new storyline. The game also most likely takes place in the 70s, so it can't be her father if he is the Bonnie Bully, which he very likely is. He would just be way too young to work as a Fazbear technician. So yeah, I think Cassie's grandfather is a cool idea, but again, there's not much evidence for it. Any evidence for it is like the same as there being evidence for Cassie's dad being the player, which there really isn't any, but some people use this poster from Daco's recent interview as evidence. I'm not really sure why. Something to do with the key. And then in like Help Wanted 2, the hippo says something about like there's a key and the key is the Faz wrench, but like I don't think that necessarily means Cassie's dad is gonna be the player, but I don't know. Mrs. Afton, again, another theory that actually has just no evidence. I just want to throw it in here because it's actually pretty cool, I think. I mean, think about it. Mrs. Afton is the only Afton that we know nothing about. You know, she's a complete blank slate, but she's related to like the most important family in the series, so it's satisfying both people who want the protagonist to be like a random person and for those who want it to be someone with a little more importance. She could give us more insight into characters like William, Mike, Elizabeth, Crying Child, Henry, and more. Overall, while the theory is very unlikely, I still think it's cool. Kind of have hope it is what happens. Let's get into some actual theories now, first of which being Henry. Henry being the player has been an idea since the game was announced. As we know, Henry is skilled with electronics, and would probably be skilled enough to, you know, go get the Mimic type shit. There's the first teaser of the game where we see Jackie get out of a music box. A lot of people have already connected this to the puppet, and maybe it is a connection to the puppet because we were playing as Henry, who is connected to the puppet for obvious reasons. Now, some people might question why Fazbear Entertainment would send in one of the founders of the company. In the trailer treats us as if we were just a random employee. In the trailer treats us as if we were just a basic employee, just now learning about our mission to get the Mimic. Well, it's possible Fazbear Entertainment would have sent in Henry because obviously all the previous teams have failed and Henry Henry. Maybe he thinks he can actually get the Mimic. As for the trailer, it's possible that the dialogue is just for the trailer and is acting as an introduction for the audience to the game, or it's like an audio log that we can find in game. However, I do find Henry being the player unlikely. I don't know why, I just feel like it's probably not going to happen. It would be cool though. Henry definitely needs more of his story filled in. And now let's talk about William, who is by far the most popular theory for the player's identity besides it being a random person. Okay, that's not true anymore. I wrote this script a long time ago. Now the most popular theory is probably actually Cassie's dad, but William is a close second. And it makes sense why. As we know, William built the Funtime animatronics and is skilled with electronics, so him going to capture the Mimic makes sense. And sure, the trailer seemingly treats us as a random employee, but I already explained that in Henry's section. Also, William's story is already very connected to the Mimic, as for a majority of the new arc, the Mimic was mimicking William, so having their stories be intertwined since the beginning makes sense. The Mimic also stuffs his victims into mascot suits. Maybe this is where William got the inspiration to stuff his victims, although I find that unlikely, but it still could be foreshadowing. Also, it makes sense for William to go and get the Mimic. The previous two teams have failed, so now William would feel like he needs to do it himself and get the Mimic, even knowing the dangers. Remember, in Follow Me, he goes after Freddy and the gang despite knowing they are dangerous, murderous animatronics. We also know that if there's one thing William is defined by, it's his ego, so him going after the Mimic, thinking he can succeed where others have failed, would just be very in character for him in my opinion. Not to mention he would have to succeed, which would just further his character, and would explain why he takes more risky actions such as, murdering children. He already succeeded once in the past. And if what I said earlier about the protagonist being the one to kill David is true, William killing David would just kind of be cool, as it would mean that William truly was the cause for almost all the tragedies related to Freddy's. However, there is one little thing that kind of makes me doubt the protagonist is William, and that is that it is strongly implied that our protagonist will actually be losing their hand in this game. Steel Wool released a poster which talks about watching out for your hand getting ripped off or something, I don't know. And then around a year and a half ago, Steel Wool did this thing called Guess the Sketch, and one of them was Combat Carl from Toy Story. And that character is known for having lost his hand. And spoilers, I guess, but it's a minor thing, so just skip the time on screen if you don't want any spoilers. There is a leaked trophy achievement with a picture of supposedly the protagonist holding a wrench, and the hand looks rather robotic, which could point to our protagonist getting a robotic hand at some point in the game. So that could rule out William as our protagonist, since we don't know if he's lost his hand, but now that I'm writing this, I kind of realized that technically he could. I mean, we've never really seen him like fully defined. I guess he could have a robotic hand. Oh well, I just kind of want to throw in the hand getting ripped off theory here. So, in the end, who do I think the protagonist will be? Well, probably William or a random person, or well, really Cassie's grandfather. Personally, I think a random person might be more likely, even with how they are unnamed at this time, but I do think I prefer William since he does play into the narrative more, especially the narrative of the Mimic, and this game is obviously focused on the Mimic's story. And overall, I think the whole idea of the old man antagonist versus the new one is pretty cool, and I would personally like to get more insight into William's character, or really any of the old characters. Also, we could get like William's internal thoughts, which would be pretty cool. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised by like the fandom's like rejection of any previous characters being the protagonist. Like, sure, it'd be nice to get new characters, but I see no problem with this game that is so heavily focused on the past, having a past character be the protagonist. I guess like maybe there is like the worry of like maybe they won't focus too much on the Mimic and they'll focus more on the protagonist if it's an old character, but like that's still a concern either way. Usually, they do like to flesh out their protagonist in these games, and like overall it's not really that much of a concern. They can flesh out the Mimic and his story while also having a little bit of focus on the protagonist. I think obviously the game will mostly be focused on the Mimic, even if someone like William is the protagonist, right? I think we can all agree on that. There's actually something I've just noticed in general. A lot of people don't want the past characters to be relevant to this new arc at all, and I'm not really sure why, honestly. We can introduce new characters while also having the old ones be important, and the old characters are already pretty important to this arc since it's a sequel to the Afton arc, and the protagonist of the last game was literally a side character from FNaF 4. But that's more of a subjective thing. So what do you think? Who will be the protagonist? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, subscribe.